In times like these, we need faith that's victorious, and you can walk in it. Welcome to Victorious Faith with Pastor Mark Cowart.
Hello and welcome to the Victorious Faith broadcast. Good to be with you today. We're continuing our study of the 7 mountains of influence. Now, if you're just tuning in and you have no idea what that is, just stay with us and you're going to learn some very powerful things. Now, this is our second week of teaching on the 7 mountains of influence. So I want to invite you, if you missed any of this and you'd like to get just teaching from the ground up on it, you can go back. And if you're subscribed to our YouTube, you can go back in the archives there. And we start with the overview, and now we're breaking down each mountain or sphere of influence. Yesterday we were talking about the mountain or the sphere of family. It's the building block of society. Today we are on the mountain of celebration, and that's what we call arts, entertainment, and sports. Before we get into the broadcast, I want to make you aware of our free offer. If you do not have my little book, Foundations of the Christian Faith, I encourage you to get this. This is a power-packed book. You know, a building is no better than the foundation that it's built upon. A house is no better than the foundation it's built on. You can have a mega mansion, a beautiful, ornate house, but if your foundation's not good, then you stand the chance to lose it. And foundations are real important with us. I'd love to send you the free hard copy book. You can also download it instantly, and it's our gift to you. Also, be sure to visit markcowart.org. All of these broadcasts are available for purchase, but we just want to do is, in the words of Dr. Lester Summerall, help feed your faith and starve your doubts completely to death. So today we're going to go and study the mountain of celebration. And let's define, first of all, what is the mountain of celebration? It's arts, entertainment, and sports. And that is the place where values and virtue are either celebrated or distorted. Think about this. You know, art will tell a lot about a person. When I go to someone's home, I'm always intrigued to look and see what kind of artwork they have and what they have out for decoration. It tells a lot about a person. And when you go throughout society, you will find that the artwork tells a great deal. I personally believe the United States of America, if you go throughout our nation, some of the statues to America's heroes, not all of them, none of them were perfect, but when you go to our nation's capital, the architecture and all of the different things, it causes my heart to look up to the Lord and think of how His hand is upon our nation. But the enemy loves to take the beautiful and make it ugly and make it wicked and make it evil. So when you think about arts, you think about entertainment, you know, you look on our TV now, it is just infiltrated with all sorts of LGBT ideology. Your advertisements, whether it's for mainstream box stores, recently in months gone by, we've seen the thing with Bud Light, where they're using just a distortion of God's creation. For instance, the transgender thing, where people that all of a sudden they're confused in their mind and they think they're a man trapped in a woman's body or a woman's body trapped in a man's body. And now it's gone to where they're mutilating our children's body, keeping it from parents. I think I can think of nothing more evil than that, and nothing that will bring a greater judgment against a people and against a nation. To be silent and to not war against it. To the point, I've shared this in the previous week, that even the large contingent of the gay community rose up and started an organization called Gays Against Groomers. And you can actually go and Google that, and you will find they are starting chapters in states. These are people that are openly gay, but they said this LGBT agenda has crossed a line. And basically, it's a part of the siege and attack on the mountain of celebration. Sports as well. How does sports become a place where values and virtues can be distorted or celebrated? Well, we see it. A lot of times when you see like Super Bowl champions and teams and basketball and baseball, well, you'll find they're both saints and sinners in there. There's Christians and there's non-Christians. And many that are outspoken Christians will glorify God. They give God the glory. And others sometimes flaunt perversion, flaunt an out-of-control lifestyle and things like that. But this particular mountain of celebration, it can include music, fashion, literature, food, movies, drama, and other things that we celebrate or enjoy in life. So let's break this down a little bit. What is the definition of celebrate? It means to publicly acknowledge something. It acknowledge a significant event or a happy day with a social gathering or enjoyable activity. For instance, like they were celebrating their wedding anniversary at a restaurant. We see that oftentimes. You're in a restaurant and all of a sudden out comes the entire staff from behind the scenes, and they've got a birthday cake or a big bowl of ice cream or something like that with a candle burning, and they start singing happy birthday and all the families gathered around. That's a celebration. That's the mountain of celebration. Some of the synonyms are to commemorate, to observe, to mark, to keep, to honor, remember, to memorialize, and things of that nature. And so interesting now, if you take the word etymology of celebrate, it came from the mid-15th century. It originally, of the Mass, from Latin, celebrates is a much frequented, something kept solemn. And it's an assembly to honor. So really in the mountain of celebration, there's kind of an honoring going on. And you might think, well, how can you honor God at a football game or a baseball game or a basketball game? You know, recently, I think I mentioned this, that we took our staff to a Rockies game, and we stood for the national anthem, and it was such a blessing. There was real reverence and honor there. People's hands across their heart as we sang, and the flag up on the big screen up there, massive screen. That was honoring God. And it's something that we need to see more of. And then there's times where the enemy has attacked this, and all of a sudden we have people dishonoring God in the mountain of celebration. For instance, the football players that refuse to stand when the national anthem is sung and they kneel. And I'm telling you, that's one of the most disrespectful things to our founding fathers, to those that have fought in war, for those families whose loved ones died in war. I can't think of a more dishonoring thing. And it's just a horrible thing to see. And I think about many of those people that dishonored God and this country, because this country would not be here were it not for God, that many of them are making exorbitant amounts of money, multiplied millions upon millions of dollars. No other country that they could have the opportunity that they have. And men and women laid down their lives. And on that time to be able to celebrate in that sphere of celebration, they choose to dishonor. Psalm chapter 16, verse 11 says, "Thou wilt show me the path of life. In thy presence is fullness of joy. At thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore." So celebration is really in the very fabric of our being. Did you know life is to be a celebration? Now, we know the enemy comes to do stealing, killing, and destroying. But even when the enemy has done that, and many of you watching have testimonies of how the enemy tried to destroy you, and he's stolen severely from you and killed and different things like that. But even in the midst of that, the very sacrifice of Calvary allows you to continue on and recapture your joy in life. Let me share another book with you. One here that changed my life. This is one of the earlier books that changed my life. It's called The Light and the Glory by Peter Marshall and David Manuel. Both these men have passed on to be with the Lord. But this book, The Light and the Glory, really began to rock my world. And I encourage you, if you go online to get it, make sure there was a 1977 copyright on this, and then 2009. You surely want to get the 2009. I believe it's on audible.com. But you're going to learn things about Christopher Columbus in here that you probably have never heard. Some of the things from his journal, Christ bearer, that's what Christopher means. And he felt led by God in discovering America. And history has distorted it. They say this guy is a brutal this and he killed these people. You need to know the story behind it. Also, the Bartons bring that out in this book called The American Story. And I know that I've showed this several different times, but I encourage you, this would be a book as far as history your children need to read, and you could read and study this with them. David and Tim Barton, you can get that online. And then also The Light and the Glory. And these men went down into some of the Ivy League schools, down into the basements, in the libraries where the dusty books are. And they started telling the true story of America. And we have to understand that Satan is one patient individual. He will take so much time to alter our history. And that's basically what's happened in our educational facilities. But let me share this about, as far as celebration, how it's in the fabric of our being. Think about this. Before our children are ever born, we introduce our children to the mountain of celebration by doing this. Think about it. So a woman finds out she's pregnant. Her and her husband, grandparents, siblings, if they have them, they are so excited. And what happens? Oftentimes they'll begin to prepare a room. And if they find out it's a boy or a girl, they'll paint accordingly, either a blue or a pink room. They get a really neat bed with all sorts of little toys, and they'll get little stuffed toys. For goodness sakes, the child won't even be able to play with most of the stuff that is bought. And, my wife with our granddaughters, which they're growing now and years are passing now. Oh my gosh, she's always thinking about them. And when she goes in a store, she's thinking of fun things to buy them, fun things that can be done. And sometimes she'll have the girls come over and she's already thinking, what are we going to have for lunch? It's a celebration of life when we are able to give glory to God. We thank God. And think about it, before the child is ever born, before the child's ever brought home, the celebration has begun, the excitement, the anticipation. It's interesting, they say the mother is expecting. When you say the mother's expecting, that means she's pregnant, even though we don't see that child. And from conception, it's going to be 9 months at best before we see that child. I remember one time, one of our favorite TV shows, it's a food channel. We like to watch that. But my favorite show, I just get a kick out of this, is the Diners, Drive-In, and Dives. Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Triple D. You know the guy with the spiked blonde hair. And he goes all over the country. And I was sitting there watching it, and of course, you get these salivations that start going on. He'll go to all these little restaurants. Some are little hole in the walls, just like it says, a little diner, a drive-in somewhere, or a dive somewhere. Those are my kind of restaurants. And all of a sudden, he'll go somewhere. It's a hidden, you've never heard of the town that it's in whatever state. And it's really awesome to see. And usually the community gathers there. There's regulars. They walk around the restaurant. They'll pass a microphone around and, what do you like about this? There'll be people that say, I was coming here 50 years ago and the founder was alive then. It's just an awesome thing. And one day when I was watching that, I realized that food is really in the mountain of celebration. And I thought about this. Food is something that God blessed us with to be something reflective of how good the Lord is, how sweet He is, how wonderful. Listen to Psalm 34, verse 8. He says, "O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in Him." And so I was watching HGTV one night, and I was watching some little restaurant that they had stumbled onto, and that's when it really occurred to me, this is the mountain of celebration. Think about, my wife loves to cook for holidays. We used to have a much larger home, so we would have a lot of people over. And she would start 3 days beforehand, oftentimes, if it was like for Easter or Thanksgiving or Christmas. And I mean to tell you, it was really a celebration. You've got all these people coming over and you have all this delicious food, and sometimes others bring their favorite dish. And as we do this with family, with our staff, with friends, with church, all of a sudden we realize what a glorious celebration it is. And I've sat down at times, and you know, when you have a dish of food, like for me, I love steak. And one time I was at one of my favorite restaurants for getting a steak. And I mean, I was really hungry. And it was just one of those meals. It was like, I began to think, surely this will be served at the marriage supper of the Lamb. It was so good. And I remember my favorite cut of steak, it was cooked perfectly. It wasn't too dry. I mean, it was perfect. I took one bite of that, and I joke about it, but I've told the church before, my taste buds will have a worship service in my mouth. And I would suddenly think, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. The reflective nature of creation points us to God and how good He is. The Lord didn't have to create food. He could have created our human bodies and just made us a hollow shell that didn't require food. He didn't have to give us taste. We could have just, had something that we just scarf it down and we're good. It could have been anything but what it is. But think of how good and wonderful food is, and creation, and all of the different types of things that He's created. The fruits, the vegetables, the meats, the delicacies, the coffees, and all sorts of different things like that. It's something that God has created for us to enjoy, because He gives us all things to enjoy, richly enjoy. But what does it do? It points us to Him and how good He is. So the mountain of celebration is a glorious mountain, and the enemy has invaded that mountain to where, you have these Grammy Awards, the Emmys, and so I've even seen it with Christian television on what they call the Dove Awards. There are times I just had to turn it off. I felt like it was more flesh on display than given to glory to God. There's a difference between entertainment and worship of God. I have a really dear friend, Ivan Tate, an evangelist. We support one of his orphanages down in Guatemala. It's the most powerful place I've ever been. He teaches a powerful lesson on being delivered from the orphan spirit. It's really born out of the testimony of his own life. And he has a message called the Invisible Worshiper. There's times I've gone places, conferences, and things like that, and all I could see when we were worshiping was the person up there. And it was more like they were given a performance. They weren't worshiping God. They were having people look to them. And you can tell the difference, trust me, when the presence of God comes in. But anyway, my friend, Ivan Tate, has a message called The Invisible Worshiper. And that is our job as believers. If you're like a worship leader or a musician, is to become invisible so you can point people to God. And yet, like on this mountain of celebration, we can be so blessed, but let us never forget where every good and every perfect gift comes from. And a couple of points I want to make here. I believe the church has been guilty of suppressing the celebration that God intended to come from this mountain and from the Sunday school room to the pulpit. And, you know, there's testimonies. There's some of the greatest musicians to ever hit the music scene. And most of the greats had gospel roots. Some of the biggest bands, some of the biggest voices. You know, if you go back and you start with Elvis Presley on that, you know, we had Elvis Presley's stepbrother here long time ago, back in the 90s, and he told me that what his dad had said, Elvis's dad, after he died, because most of the biggest, hottest selling Elvis records had gospel music on it. And, you know, he wouldn't have a hotel room without a grand piano, and he'd have gospel quartets come in and they'd sing all through the night. And he loved gospel music. And, you know, this is not to fix blame, but to say this. I think the church bears responsibility because we never made room for that mountain of celebration in the area of music per se, because we had this little box that we thought God resided in. And if somebody didn't sound like, look like, act like, walk like, and talk like a certain thing, then get out of this church. Don't you dare. We're not having that here. And I think that caused a lot of damage. And then there's a lot of people that went out into the arena. They were for sale. They found if they bowed their knee to a particular thing, they would be welcomed up on this mountain of celebration. And that's happened with many Christian people who had strong gospel roots, and then all of a sudden they found themselves straying from the faith and what have you. So the fruit of that alone has caused a horrific distortion where the church tries to look and sound more like the world. This is a sad thing. I remember one time there was a particular evangelist that he was trying to get a meeting here. This is a long time ago. And so his promo packet and his bio he sent, and it had 3 pages typed of all of these ungodly, worldly singers, some of them just big time, the biggest of the biggest. And he listed all that. And you know what? That has a place, I suppose. There are a lot of people that, you know, started right, went into the world, came back to the Lord, came out from among them. And it is sometimes intriguing, and it fits to find out where they came from. But I remember when I got this packet of this particular evangelist who was a musician, he would preach the word and sing and all that, and very gifted. It just had an imbalance to it. It felt like they were using the badge of the world to try to promote themselves. But the word says it's the Lord that promotes us. He's the glory and the lifter of our head. And a lot of times Christians are bowing down to the world system or trying to become more worldly, and they call it becoming relevant. And they get so worldly and things like that there's no room for the glory of God to come in. And the Lord doesn't need help. I believe the church ought to be raising the bar, setting the standard for celebration. There are some Christian songs, I believe, that have been written that came straight out of heaven, and they ended up on secular stations. I've been in stores before where, you know, I'm listening to a country station or a rock and roll station. I'm not listening to it. It's playing in the store, in the grocery store or the restaurant. And then all of a sudden, a true gospel song would come through. And I went, there it is. There was so much of heaven's touch on that song that even the world wanted to hear it. Listen to Proverbs 25, verse 26. It says, if the godly give in to the wicked, it's like polluting a fountain or muddying a spring. We don't need to become like the world to reach the world. I think the world's had enough of that. They do the world better than the church can do the world. What we need to bring to them is what they can't get anywhere else. The presence of God, the anointing of God, the joy of the Lord, the celebration of God. Because when the church remains superficial in our walk with God, in our worship services, in our preaching, because you have preachers that they'll say, well, I'm not going to talk about that because I don't want to offend them. And they're missing it because God watches over His word to perform it, and He won't let it return to Him void. I want to close with this one scripture. This is my favorite scripture out of the Message Bible. But life is to be a celebration. Listen to Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. And I'm going to read this now out of the Message Bible. It's really powerful. Let me tell you why you're here. You are here to be salt seasoning that brings out the God flavors of this earth. If you lose your saltiness, how will people taste godliness? You've lost your usefulness and will end up in the garbage. Verse 14, here's another way to put it. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on a hill. If I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm putting you on a light stand. Now that I've put you there on the hilltop, on a light stand, shine. Keep open house. Be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous Father in heaven. Boy, if that doesn't describe the mountain of celebration, I don't know what does. And so I hope this has blessed you learning about the mountain of celebration today. Remember, all of the books that I mentioned today are available at markcowart.org. We've got a recommended resources list there. And many of the books I've mentioned in that are included. And so read books that will challenge you and inform you and encourage you. And so I'll be continuing to mention those. And then also don't forget our free copy. Would love to get it to you today. Request it, and I will see you tomorrow at this same time.
The foundations of our society are under siege, and we must be those that restore what has been destroyed. Find out how in this free mini-book, Foundations of the Christian Faith by Pastor Mark Cowart. In this booklet, you will learn the 6 foundations of faith and how you can help restore them in our nation. Get your free copy today at markcowart.org. In this series, we look at the absolute importance of truth and of understanding the 6 foundational doctrines in Hebrews 6. On this solid foundation, we can build, grow, and impact our world for Christ. This series is available in CD, DVD, and USB format. Order online at our website, markcowart.org.